were doing the Helm chart live demo, and just some of the updates from last session. So we've had new releases of subgraph radio charts, Nimbus and Nethermind, new releases of namespaces for monitoring Ethereum and storage. And a big one is we've continued doing work on our docs. So that means we've added an orientation map to our documentation page. We've updated FAQs and introduction with more details, and we have updated our quick start guide to mention how to get started in the event that you choose to only use Launchpad charts instead of the whole stack. So I'll just quickly show here. So when you go to our docs, now if you press on Launchpad, it goes through this page, which is an orientation map. It gives you a quick introduction of what Launchpad is, and then it tells you where to go to find different types of resources. So for example, if you want to find out, I don't know, like tutorials, or if you want to find out how often new versions of the projects are released and how we decide on namespaces to support, you can go here and so on. So that's one. And then the other thing was on the quick start. Now you have this section where it says, based on how you're using the project, you can either go use the quick start with Launchpad end-to-end. So that means starter, charts, and namespaces. Or you can use Launchpad charts and Helm file, and then it gives you full details on how to implement that. It is a lot more involved than using namespaces end-to-end, and you'd have to do a lot of management yourself. But we've introduced this based on a lot of feedback we've received. It would be really useful if you do check out our documentation and you have more features, you have more things that you'd like to see. Please do let us know and we'll try to implement it. We're just trying to make it so that it's as readable and user-friendly as possible and clear as well. So yeah, and that's all I had. The rest is over to Carlos for the demo. Stop sharing. Thank you.
Yes. That's not going to be much of a demo, I think, but yes, that was the plan. I'm going to try and share my screen. So last time we were, let me just try and share the screen. We were developing a Firehose chart, but we didn't get very far. We just had some boilerplate. I think this is, yes, it is. Okay, so do you have any specific points you'd like to touch upon, Vince?
I think I brought up a lot of stuff last time, but I'll just let you get through your thing this time because I think we didn't get very far because we got into the weeds. So I'll let you do your thing. And then if I have any questions after.
Okay, I have just a couple of points I'm going to go through, but first I'm just going to mention that I'm probably not going to be at my best, having some issues with focus and task clarity. So apologies for that, but I'll do an honest attempt. Okay, so one of the subjects I thought about touching upon, and I think is rather useful. We're not using it at the moment on our charts, but I was developing a chart that implements something of the sorts of, it has support for using either a PVC for storage or a bucket. But when you use a PVC, typically you don't easily get read-write many volumes, right? It tends to be, unless you have NFS, or it's not as easy a capability to get. So, and the workload in question does not handle all that very well when using local file system storage. It's not built to have multiple pods writing at the same time to the same storage. So from that, you would want to limit the number of replicas to one when you're using that type of storage. When you're using object storage, then you want to allow to have like high availability and multiple replicas. Those are not the only. I think you can think of more examples where we end up with this thing where we want some values to be limited or constrained as a function of other values, right? Like you want some setup does not only leverage or rely on a single like tunable or value, but a combination of them. And you want to allow different combinations, but it needs to be coherent. You know, like, okay, so if it's file system, then replicas need to be one. If it's object storage, and you can allow for more replicas, or things like that. And when you have circumstances like that, I think it becomes very hard to convey to the user those, I don't know, like when you take an Helm chart, you're going to look at the values and you're going to start playing with things, and you're very limited in terms of what you can give as feedback to the user on the values file itself, unless you go really hardcore on comments that people may not read anyways, because they usually take the quickest path, which is, I think that clashes with their expectations. So a nice thing that can be done is part of the Helm spec is this notes.txt file. And this notes.txt file, you can just write some banner here.
Sorry, Carlos. If you're sharing your screen, we're only seeing your Discord.
Something went wrong then, because I was sharing my screen. I am. I'll try to reshare. Oh, I know what happened. I shared just the Discord window. I think you're seeing not Discord now, right?
Yeah, now.
Okay, so this notes of text, you can use it to do a banner. Thanks for installing X with version something. Maybe a link. Please visit us somewhere else. But it's also templateable, notwithstanding the fact it's a text file. So the text is going to be shown when somebody tries to install your chart. And you can template logic here, which allows you to do things like, okay, if the example I was giving, storage dot, I'm making up the values, but you get the idea. I'm just focusing on the structure of it. Storage dot object star dot enabled. It's false. Okay, it's not. Okay. If I'm not using object store and like replica count is bigger than 1, then I want to. So I need to put this, yes, welcome Helm template, where ends and stuff logic operators have to be done like this as a function and parameters, and you have to like nest parentheses a lot. Anyhow, so we have like this, we have something like this. And then I may print out some warning, right? And give extra stuff. Or I may actually want to flat out fail, like do some validation, which is mandatory, and you actually don't want to really stop the stop the whole thing right then. There's a templating function called fail. You can use this one, and it will actually stop Helm from proceeding to install, and it does display the message. Not on this construct, because when templating goes through this, it's just going to fail. So, and it's never going to get to this point. But you could have some var, I guess. You go like output, and you start with something, and you can have like a /n if you want to. And then you would, instead of just having a message here, you will add this to your var with print. So like print output, and then this is a string, warning, stuff, maybe another /n, and then at the end of it, you would guarantee to print the output, and then repeat the conditional and file out, stopping the procedure. So, okay, this is a nice place. This notes.txt is kind of a nice place if you guys want to do validation to check that when there's this complexity of interdependent values that need to be set together, the all available permutations, and to validate on that. Any questions here on this point? I guess not. So this is one point. The other one was I still wanted to play a bit more with the macros. I think they are a bit cumbersome. Do you have any use case for macros that you may have in mind, Vince?
Let me check mine. Because in my home chart that I'm redoing, I know I've defined a P2P port. I've defined, if P2P port's enabled, print 1, else default 1. Yeah, those are the only main ones I have right now is trying to get the node port running. And then also on mine, I took a different approach with the ENV. However, I have not seen it done like that. That looks interesting because I did it I basically had it fill out a config map.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, this
I
is
think you saw
not.
that.
I don't think this is very interesting because, like, you can't really easily. There are envars here, like there are flags there that you would like to come from other places. Like this metrics address, you probably rather have a whole metrics section for configuring metrics where you will group things like are you creating service monitors or like what's the metrics part, stuff like that. Right. That's 99. Or these addresses. I think this was here last time as kind of a starting point about how to unpack this and make it an interface that is more easily to overlay stuff on or override some values and etc. And that kind of forces us into some templating. Like we will break this down on different envars maybe. If the workload does support just like this envar, that's ideal. Some don't. And some actually needs to be configured with like TOML config files that need to be templated. Is there any use case of those that you rather work us out? Because otherwise I'm gonna take this and unpack it and do some building of this at runtime. Like I'm gonna break this apart into envs or something like that. And then I'm gonna do the templating to assemble this command line on the deployment itself. Well, I'm actually going to do helpers to do that, and then invoke those helpers. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask because like the various different blockchains work different ways and they have different command line arguments, right? These are command line arguments to Geek, right? But if you're running
Yes.
Nitro, you have different arguments. And if you're running, Solana, you have different arguments. Right? So like the variety
Yes.
of arguments you can pass to Fire ETH reader node arguments is like infinite. Because
I think they're broken apart into different. Yes, that's a Firehose specific thing because so far our shards are blockchain node specific, right? There are multiple chains that use like Git or use Aragon, but the flags are the same given it's Git and Aragon. That does pose a different issue. So thinking about, I think from what I recall from Firehose, it actually has two sets of parameters. It has Firehose parameters and then parameters to pass to Git, right?
Yeah, or whatever your blockchain node is.
Yeah, whatever like your execution is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
So
sometimes the
I
execution
think,
is Firehose itself, because if you're using the RPC polar, then you actually tell Firehose to invoke Firehose, which is an interesting thing.
yeah, I would separate those, and I would still break them apart for the ones that are Firehose specific, because those ones are going to be stable. And then we'll need to handle the ones that are passed to the blockchain nodes or that vary with the blockchain nodes. If you want to build a chart that does support all of those sort of combinations, then it needs to be free, right? We need to, it needs to be flexible. We don't know ahead of time which they are. You basically,
Right, you need a way
from the
that
point
you
of
can
view,
handle certain parameters, with some special logic, like, like the JWT, for example, if it has to connect to, Lighthouse. And other ones, it's like, well, I don't know, whatever the user happens to put here would just pass it through.
yeah, it becomes tricky.
Yeah, the more things you do, I've found you're like, oh, I need to do that too. Because because like you say, like if you do like a Geeth chain with the whole JWT and stuff, then you need to have that service available, and you need the what's it called? You need it to be able to talk to each other with whatever your lighthouse is. So you have to spin up a lighthouse and then connect to that, and that's it's like and I was wondering, like,
Yes,
when you're doing these execution things, should it be that we pick one or whatever, like lighthouse or something, and then put that in the subcharts folder to where we can call upon that in the Helm chart and say, "Hey, grab Nimbus," or should it be something like we're like, "Okay, I'm just gonna deploy the Nimbus chart. Now I have that good and it's synced up. It's waiting for an execution node. Now I'll run the Firehose Helm."
I mean, I think there's two paths here, right? One is like just going back to the first issue. Just a second, I'll go to the Nimbus Lighthouse one next. I was thinking about, yes, the challenge here is that the blockchain knows it is going to take an unpredictable number of command line arguments, but taken from the point of, and you would like to template some of them, like as Matthew pointed out, like the JWT part. I think there are common expectations there, so that can be approached as if your chart is like more abstract and more general, and provides some facilities. Like it's predictable that you don't know what the blockchain node is going to have, but a lot of them are going to expose metrics. They're going to have a metrics part, a flag to set that, and they're going to be exposing metrics. And they will have a JWT or taking a secret. So you could have a configuration section to handle that. But in the end, if you have some like M, and then if you have an M section, and then you have a blockchain nodes section, and this part here is going to be, like free for all. The user can come here, you can pass those arguments, you don't know what they're going to be, but you can have a common interface, a common offering elsewhere for some common things, like let's say it takes in a JWT is going to have like a secret. The issue here is that the user is going to have to template this, right? For it to interface with what you have, you're going to have to either take in another value for your common thing about like your infrastructure for it input a JWT somewhere. So this one is going to be linked by referencing some other value, or the user is going to pass you, like there's an expectation that's going to be a flag that takes in a JWT, or a flag that takes in a matrix address and part, and the user is going to pass you the name of that flag. So either you implement logic that, okay, user gave me a flag with this name, so this feature is enabled, and you have like a common way of configuring that part of the blockchain nodes, which is common for the chart, and a lot of them will use it. Or the user directly passes some templating, and then on your logic, you know that you have to run this through TPL, like, right? Because it needs to be templated, because it's referencing a value on some other config section. Does that make sense?
Yeah, somewhat. That's kind of the approach I took when I did my first Helm chart, was kind of giving more fungibility to the user because you kind of need it. And I do think needs to be some expectation of like, you know what you're doing. So yeah, I tried to give my original chart like maximum fungibility of, okay, whatever you put here, that's the config that the reader node's going to run. Are you running the right config? Okay, cool. The only parts are kind of additional that I've been doing are, snapshots and node porting and yeah, those are like the two main things I've been struggling with. And then also I know like obviously not everyone's gonna want to, store their Firehose locally and they want to use object storage. So I need a pathing for that of like, okay, is this gonna be object storage or is this not gonna be object storage? But that's mainly taken care of in the config. So that's not that much of an issue because it's just kind of like linking to elsewhere.
Yeah.
But having it,
Going,
not create storage, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. The problem, I think there's the templating part for this type of complexity. Like the more abstract you want to make things or like flexible, the more logic you're going to have to need, right? And the problem with Helm templating logic is that this is a really lousy programming language as a programming language. I don't think it's even Turing complete. Like it's not really a programming language; it's a templating language. And
That's why I hate
there's no good.
templating languages, right? I end up
Yes.
just write a program to do it instead.
Yes, it's that you have no way of structuring it for visibility. Like the more logic you add, the less visible it becomes, and that escalates rather fast and becomes hard to maintain and hard to make sense of it, of what's going on. I don't know of it, like there's nothing you can do about that. So that will
Right,
encourage
so
you a lot.
that's why we ended up in our current setup to just pass the entire reader node
Yes.
argument blob, right? And
Yes.
not
So
try
there's
to write a whole templating thing around it, because we did that originally when we first set up things like 4 years ago. And like the maintenance computation you had to do in your head to figure out what you were changing was just too much. So I rewrote it to make it simpler, and it just passed the Firehose arguments, and that's it.
Yes, that's a philosophical debate that I have a lot, but I think there's a trade-off here. Like, obviously, being aware of it means that you want to keep it low or light, or even like go radical, right? Like almost no logic, we're just passing things. It's just like a dumb pass-through kind of thing. You can parameterize things, and that's it. Everything else, there's no like configuration logic. It's just a pass-through of parameters. If you go that way, though, it means you're not implementing configuration logic at all, which means that you are not easing the burden in any way of orchestrating complex setups, like many deployments across like many nodes, etc. So it's perfectly legitimate.
Yeah, so that's the thing. So we didn't
Helm.
do exactly just pass everything through. We did some little magical stuff that, inserts the right blockchain, RPC endpoint or whatever, right? So it does have a few of those configurations, but we didn't I didn't try to make it infinitely flexible or infinitely configurable, if you know what I mean.
I'm just gonna keep this conversation, but just gonna sidestep go back 1 second, because I wanted to cover both points raised before. The other one was about the dependencies. The dependencies can also be optional. Like when you go to the chart, the question about Nimbus and Lighthouse, you could potentially have like this awareness, like some blockchain nodes are gonna need a consent layer, a consensus layer, or stuff like that. So you figure out some kind of configuration interface, and then you have options. You either have specific options, or people can actually pass a chart they want. A chart they want, I don't think you can pass, because I don't think you can template chart.yaml. I'll need to check, but there's some basic support for optional dependencies. Like you can have dependencies here, and you can list them, and they can be made to be conditional on some value. So only if that value is that Lighthouse that enabled, then you have this. Or only if that value is that Nimbus that enabled, then you have like an optional dependency here. So there is support at least for optional dependencies. I'm not sure of how much conditional logic you can actually implement here, but there's conditionality support for dependencies. That will allow you to offer a broad range that not all gets pulled in, like it becomes configurable in terms of using Nimbus or Lighthouse. It also means that you don't know ahead of time what people are going to choose or go with, if they're going to use Nimbus or Lighthouse, which would mean that you don't know if the values for that are going to come under Nimbus here or under Lighthouse here, right? Another issue to solve. You'll either like support both by implementing like defaults for both, and those defaults will then be tailored to some common. You'll have some config section, which is like consensus layer common, right? And then you'll be templating. You'll have to. Yeah, this is tricky. There's no good way to do this. You can't really use templating on values. So
yeah, that was the problem I had last time, was templating on values.
Yeah,
that's the exact problem I ran into.
Yeah, because you can on your own templates, on your charts templates, you can do that trick about you use templating here, and then you, instead of using it directly on your templates, you're passing it through TPL, right? The function to template. But outside charts, you don't have that option even. So I'm not seeing any way to keep this dry. You'll actually need, like, people have to stick it their values in Nimbus or in Lighthouse, and you can't really make that under a common config section. So yes, hard to do like charts with dependencies and stuff like that. Logic escalates at a loss of readability very, very fast. So we're back to that philosophical argument. And I think the point I wanted to make is we do struggle with that balance a lot. Like, we also don't like Helm templating, and we don't like code that reads like Helm templating. But we do want to offer some convenience and some configuration management. If you're doing your own thing and you're dislike that, it's very legitimate to lower, like just be much thinner on Helm. But I do feel like you still end up with you're moving the problem to outside of Helm, which may be a great idea because there are other tools to do configuration management that are more flexible, more visible, like maybe better. But if you do need some, like you do need some way to keep your infrastructure dry, right? For it to scale to a large, like you're going to be orchestrating a lot of deployments, a lot of pods. They're going to have values that need to be in sync or like to solve that configuration management problem. At some point, you're going to want to tackle it on some tool or on some programming language or some system, right? And that can be outside of Helm. Helm can be a sooner and more of a pass-through thing or closer to that. But I think you'll still find the need to actually tackle this problem just outside of Helm, but elsewhere, right?
Yeah, just from a user experience standpoint, when I built it, because I basically want to like throw the config blob approach with my config maps, like auto writing themselves. You just put the blob of the config in the values handle, and
Yeah.
it'll run whatever you set it to run. And then I just also knew that I needed my Nimbus up for it to work. So then I just installed the Nimbus Helm chart and pointed that to my Firehose Geth auth endpoint, and it worked. That's just the outside user experience because I knew I needed a consensus layer, and I installed it separately and connected it. But
Yes. Separately is fine, and it makes sense, and it's actually what we tend to choose. Like our Helm charts are not multi-chart. I don't think, and most of them, like I don't think any of them are. We also dislike that. We kind of moved that. That's why we're doing namespaces, right? We moved the whole concept of wanting to have like this meta Helm charts that offer you a lot of options. We agree, it's terrible. And that's where we're leveraging in namespaces Helm file. It's a cleaner way to bundle Helm releases together. Like, or the whole concept of, okay, these two charts go together and I want to share some configuration elements between them. It's just much cleaner to do that on a separate layer, an upper layer, instead of trying to implement that in logic, Helm templating logic. But finally, the point I wanted to make was on this philosophical debate and about how awful templating is, there's obviously a problem to solve or a need. And templating has all of these drawbacks, and the alternative in my head actually is substituting it by auto-generation. Like if you can like if instead of templating, your YAMLs are being auto-generated by like some program, then that's another avenue, like a different like kind of approach to the problem. Not templating, like auto-generating stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the way
Um,
Streamcast deals with this. They auto-generate the
yeah,
YAMLs.
it's also my personal preference for auto-generation. The logic needs to be somewhere, right? But auto-generating approaches have more visible codes. But yes, but you do need to keep yourself dry. Like you're talking about config blobs, right? But imagine you have like a very big scale, like different versions, like you do. Pinex actually has a reasonably big scale. So I'm sure you guys won't want to go by hand maintaining like 30 of those different blobs like frequently, right? Keep them in sync or keep them updated, or like it's prone to error. It's a lot of maintenance overhead. It's what, right? You'll need a
Yeah,
way to
so
start auto generating those blobs.
yeah, so I mean, the way we've done it is the things that are different, like I pasted some Firehose node reader argument things in the chat, just some example ones. I just copy pasted them from our config. Right, so some of them you can see they have an embedded variable in the middle of it, so that gets expanded before it hits Firehose. And most of the other parts of the config are either all the same, or they also have variables that get auto expanded based on the blockchain. So based on the label applied, we know that this is a Arbitrum1, so the Arbitrum1 is called arb1 in our environment, so it automatically inserts that. So, but yeah, so we have tools to auto generate, the configs. That's how we do it today.
Okay,
which is actually how Vince generated the YAMLs for the Firehose thing. He just ran the configurator, copy pasted it into the Firehose for Kubernetes.
okay, then I think auto generation is good. But it's also much harder to offer general solutions for auto generation. Like from our point of view, like how would you go about, like you build your own tools, right? And you do
That's
that.
it. If we build our own tools, it's fine. I'm comfortable doing that because we've done that before. What we're trying to do here is how do we collaborate with you guys so we can build general tools that other people can use and not have, Pinax specific things. Right.
Yeah. You will find that the challenge of developing abstract general usage auto-generating tools then becomes like a very hard challenge as well.
I agree. This is why, like, a lot of the stuff we develop is open source. However, most of the stuff we use to manage our own infrastructure, we don't release it because it's some internal thing that just handles our own stuff our own way.
Okay.
Right.
So
when we onboard Jonathan or Sajad or Vince into the team, they have to go learn our tool chain. Right. That's how it currently works.
Yeah, it's feasible. When you just go specific, it's very hard to make that useful to others.
Yeah, exactly.
To make tools on that space. And that's why you go back to templating, like, because there's this whole ecosystem with Helm and stuff like that, where you can offer some like universal usage or like convenience of general usage. On the auto-generating thing, I also feel like it's either a very hard problem, like unapproachable, or you just forget about all of that and do what it is. Like very hardwired specific to exactly like what you want and no more. Not even, you probably don't even have a lot of like error handling and stuff like that, right? It just input the right values, right? Don't validate even.
Depends on where it is. Some stuff there's more validation code than actual code that runs the thing, depending on what it is. But for like Firehose node arguments, we do zero validation for that. We just because if you pass it through and it works, great. If it doesn't work, well, it doesn't work. So the Firehose will crash. It doesn't work. Exactly. So there's no validation there.
Yes, I think the trade-off is that. And I get why you will go with auto generation. I also actually like it. In fact, we like it so much that if you actually take a look at Launchpad namespaces, you will see that we're not our Elm files on Launchpad namespaces.
You're auto-generating your own Helm files.
Yes, there's Helm files that implement like this pieces of logic and those features, like the feature flags that make the releases conditional, and the stuff like we don't write this; they are auto-generated. If you go to the source directory, you will see there's a scheme on schemas, like we have schemas for them on QSchemas, which is a nice language for auto-generating stuff that declared in like what feature it has, if it has a scaling interface, declares like the releases. It packs the namespace in like Aragon, Lighthouse, Proxy, and then there's like a build tool here, which is a Q file. We use Q for this. That like based on what's on the schemas, spews out these Helm files for Launchpad namespaces. So yes, we do like auto generation, but it's not trivial at all to build general usage auto generation stuff. It becomes a programming, like a high complexity programming issue, right? You need to write a lot of code and to order things very well in terms of abstractions and in terms of like structure. It's not trivial at all. Okay, I think that settles this point. I can really offer you much than this agreement with that vision. So I mentioned Note was a nice thing. I don't know if you have any experience with tests. I would also like to mention because I feel like to me, I never looked much into Helm tests, and just basing on the name, I had the whole total like wrong assumption about what they were going to be about. So I don't know if you're familiar with Helm tests. If you've been using those on Pinex or even looked at them. Contrary to what one may assume, Helm tests have nothing to do with testing the actual Helm charts. They're just about you building tests to test the deployment. So it's actually a very simple scheme, because when you talk about coding tests, you actually usually tend to think about unit tests or integration tests, like things that are going to check up your code. So I maybe had the expectation it was a way to validate values or check like consistency of the logic implemented on Helm, but it's nothing like that. The tests are something you can have. Let me go back to the directory here. You can have a tests folder, and it's either a pause or a job that is going to be ran only when you do Helm tests. So instead of being something that gets deployed, it's something that is run once. And other than that, it's kind of free. You just add a label to it, helm.hook test. You can add a bunch of them, and you can use them to do things like after the chart is deployed, go like, okay, let me try to do an API request to validate it. Or that's a bit silly example, because if you're going to develop that logic for that, you'll probably just put that on a health check or in like one of those Kubernetes checks. Make a better probe than just like a dumb trivial request. But you could run either jobs or pods that run commands, whatever you want, right? Like BuzzyBox with a script to validate different parts of the deployment. And then you can make that part of Helm and use those tests for Helm to know if they fail. Okay, this deployment failed, let's roll it back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay, and tests come in as a general, like a specific usage of the whole Helm hook subsystem that works the same way. Helm has hooks. It's based on you having pods that have annotations to run in different stages. It has a lot of hooks like pre-deployment, post-deployment. You can use them to say dynamically generate some kind of a config map or secret that to create a resource on the cluster, things like that. It's basically the same system. Test is just a specific implementation of using the hooks subsystem of Helm, and it's built like this. Pods that are just run once and then are removed, do not stay as part of the install. So it's a runtime thing. Okay. Those are the points I wanted to touch upon as well. Anything you'd like to go over, Vince?
Well, I guess just looking when I was looking at the Firehose that's like published on Launchpad, I noticed that there was like a volume claim template in every single stateful set of every component. But you only need like one volume claim, right? You only need one for because they're all because reader is writing to it, and then everything else is reading what the reader wrote.
Yes. Yeah. That's not merged. I mean
Okay.
that was like a work in progress kind of
Okay.
thing.
Yeah,
It's
because I
on
was
some
like,
branch, right?
okay, because I was like, is there something about Kubernetes that I don't understand? But my Firehose worked with just the single one. But I was just wondering if the best approach is like, doing that volume claim template on reader, and then just, not having it on the others. That's kind of the way I did it in the one I sent you, was just having a volume claim
Yes.
template in just reader. And then I guess my other thing is like, when you have yeah. And I guess the other thing would be, so in looking at the way snapshots were done, let's say on Aragon, is that because I'm trying to do the snapshots the way you did in Aragon, and I don't know, the way I did it, or the in Firehose that I sent you, I can get that one to work, but the Aragon one, I can't get it to work, and I'm not sure what I'm missing.
Let
And
me see if I'm looking at the right thing. I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to go to the Aragon chart. So this is Launchpad namespaces, charts, Aragon. So we're talking about the init container for snapshots.
yeah,
This one.
yeah, because if you look at the one I did, it does the same thing, I think, or accomplishes the same thing. It's just very different.
Uh, I don't have the one you sent me here. But I do have the Aragon one here. How is it different? Like, what's fundamentally different?
I will.
And why can't you? And what's the behavior like that you can't get to work?
So I'm trying to do just to launch like the reader, like completely rewritten basically. And I just get, it creates I'm not trying to do the snapshot exactly right now, just getting the reader working with a lot of these snippets. Like I get no logs, it creates the container, it creates the PVC, it gets bound, but it just does not run. I get no logs, and I'm just trying to figure out how to further debug it and see like what's going wrong here. Because I even run Helm template, everything looks good. But I don't know. It's just it doesn't like me.
Do you have? Can you share your screen? Like, do you have
Yeah,
the troubling piece of? Maybe you
yeah,
can share a screen and you can do like try to do the debug thing. Even though we're almost out of time, but let's at least try.
yeah. I have a piece right here. Let me see.
Okay, so the templating works and you get out what you will expect, right? So you have init containers. Those work. You said they're working. When you said you had no logs, is it on the init container or like the main workload? I'm not sure if you're hearing me, Vince.
Oh God, I wasn't hitting my because it pushed the talks on here. Yeah, it's the main workload, the Firehose Ethereum Reader 0. Like the PVC gets created, the container's up, but it doesn't run, and it just back off loops restarts with this because I threw in more logic from like Aragon.
Yes. So I mean, the init containers need to run first. So if it was going to hang on the init container, like if it doesn't exit gracefully, then the main workload does not proceed to launch.
Yeah,
So
and
if you
I
have like a
write.
init container, yeah. So that would make sense to be it. So let's look at that logic there. But you have two. You have the node parts one and that one as well, right?
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Do you have any idea if any of them do both run? Like they have like output something like that. They both have echoes, so they should give you some output. They have a sense if they finish like successfully.
So for right now, I've turned both of them off in the values YAML, and it still doesn't work, which is strange.
Okay, so let's look at the main workload.
I think what now looking at it, do I need to put, because you had it like this in Aragon, do I need to put if above the sh, because I also need to run args here, because in your Aragon one you
Uh,
ran command and then sh and then you had init node port. Yeah, now looking at it, I probably need to
yes,
put this above
that's
the
your
sh.
problem. Yeah, like those are not args to sh. Yeah, you gotta join those. Like you need to handle your args with logic on that templating chunk for the command. If you're doing that, you can't mix that pattern with args separate. I don't think that's going to work.
So this won't work either, because I GPT'd my way to asking it if I can run both, and it said I could, but it might be a liar. I don't know.
Like looking at this doesn't seem right in the sense that, okay, now if node part is disabled, like you're just passing an empty command, right? You're overriding the Docker image command, default command, but by an empty thing.
Yeah. So, well, it was supposed to run the init node port basically, because that's how it is in the Aragon Helm chart. I believe it runs this env init node port, which gets mounted here, which is run here. I guess in the essence of time, I can just fiddle with it a little more, and then I can just send it to you and have you look it over and see if you can find anything.
Sorry, I was looking at Terragon. Yes, I think the issue lies on that. Like that command and args usage, as you have it there. Like if you notice, if you go to Aragon, we don't have our args there.
Yes.
We actually use logic to go over the args on the values and add them there, because yeah, what you're doing with that sh minus ac and then the pipe symbol is going like, okay, so the command I'm going to run is going to be a shell script, and then you template it. And so you need to execute Aragon there. Like you can use that conditional, okay, if you have node port enabled on the env init node port, but you still need to type all of the rest, right? Like
Yeah, you
you're
still
going
need
to need
args.
to,
Yeah.
yeah, like nowhere in here you are calling Aragon. So like you're overriding command, so the Docker image having command Aragon is not going to apply anymore. You have like an arg section for Aragon, but like where are you calling Aragon? You're not. So
Well,
what you
the
could do
arg
is like,
sections or my arg sections for Firehose, and then this was to just get the node port up, unless there's a simpler way to do it through args.
well, okay, so I was mentioning Aragon, so then you want Firehose. Like the conditional for the node port, you stick that if right above the init node port, but the thing is, after the end on that conditional, so I'm talking inside command, you still need now to invoke your command. So be it Firehose or Aragon, in case of the Aragon chart, you need to call it. Like, what is your container going to be running? Like maybe by default it was Firehose, but you're overriding the command, right?
Well, yeah, basically I wanted it to run the node port script, and then
And that
also,
something else.
yeah, exactly.
Then you need to call the Firehose.
So I
Right?
need to
Like
use
the container.
command or arg, not both.
Well, I wouldn't use ours. I'm not sure it's going to work. You can leave it be, but after that end of the conditional, you need to be invoking Firehose. Like, what is the container going to run? Maybe the Docker file set up command to run Firehose, but what command does is override that. So if you're overwriting that command, the container is left with nothing to run. Like it has no default command, right? When you build a container and you just call it to run, how does it know what to do, like what executable to call?
Yeah, because with the Firehose container just running start, it's already known. So you just have to run start in the args.
Oh yeah, but start is not start is a command, not an argument.
Yeah.
Isn't start
Exactly.
an argument? Isn't start an argument to Firehose? Isn't there a Firehose
Yes.
binary?
Yes.
Okay. Like my point then is there's nowhere on command or args do you see Firehose, right? You're not calling Firehose.
Well,
You only get away.
if I take out
Go ahead.
command, it'll work.
Yes, because command is overridden. Like the Docker file
Yeah.
for Firehose is specifying that the default command is Firehose. So if you're not overriding it, it's going to run Firehose
Oh, I
with
get
the
what you're saying.
args and args. But you're overriding command, so now you need to have Firehose there. So that
Yes.
the container executes Firehose.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. Yes.
So I was after end. Basically, after that end section, you need to hardwire their Firehose to restore the default command of Firehose.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. Yes. Aha, that's what I was missing.
Yes. After that end, you go like bin slash bin slash file. I don't know what the path is, but you get the point.
Yes. I know exactly what you're saying. It makes perfect sense. Yes. Because it's no longer, I'm overriding what the container normally calls, where it just says Firehose when it starts running. And I'm overriding that. Yes. Makes perfect sense.
Okay, so that's your issue. Okay, and we're over time. Any final questions?
No, I think I'll continue to play with this and then I'll shoot you over the new one once I finish it.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's appreciated. So Slim Chef. So thanks everyone for coming, and sorry for being a bit. It was hard for me to focus today. Well, been of assistance, and please let us know if you have any more specific things. Let us know ahead of time. We may do some next session covering them. Keep the feedback coming. And yes, thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you very much.